The Great Hall of the Galactic Assembly was filled with representatives from over 200 species. They came from worlds of ice and fire, from planets where the air was poison and moons where the gravity could crush bone. They were ancient races who had traveled the stars for millions of years. They believed they had seen everything the universe could offer. They were wrong. Commander Vexthal walked slowly to the center of the speaking platform. His forearms hung at his sides, and his gray skin showed the marks of 40 years of war. He had fought in campaigns across 3 galaxies. He had faced enemies that could kill with a thought, and monsters that fed on fear itself. Nothing had ever made him afraid, until he met the humans. The Council had called him here today because a new species had entered galactic space. They came from a small blue planet on the edge of an unremarkable solar system. They called themselves humans, and they had only been traveling between stars for less than 200 years. To the ancient races of the Assembly, they were babies taking their first steps. Many in the Council thought these newcomers would be easy to control, easy to use, easy to exploit. Vexthal was here to tell them how wrong they were. Honored members of the Assembly, he began, his voice rough from old injuries to his throat. I stand before you today not as a commander, not as a representative of the Corvani Empire, but as a witness. I have seen things that changed my understanding of what is possible. I have faced an enemy that does not think like us, does not fight like us, and does not stop like us. He paused and looked around the room. Some of the younger delegates were already bored. They whispered to each other, making jokes about the nervous old soldier. Vexthal did not blame them. He had been just like them once. 3 years ago, he continued, I led a military campaign against a human mining colony on a planet called Helion 7. We had 800 of our finest warriors. We had 12 battle cruisers in orbit. We had weapons that could turn mountains to dust, and shields that could stop a nuclear blast. He took a deep breath. The humans had 200 miners and a small security team. They had no warships. Their weapons were outdated by our standards. Their armor was primitive. A Drenari delegate laughed out loud. And you are here to warn us about these creatures? It sounds like you could have defeated them by accident. Vexthal turned to face the delegate. His eyes were cold and empty in a way that made the laughter die in the Drenari's throat. We lost, Vexthal said simply. We lost every single battle. By the end of the campaign, I had fewer than 100 soldiers left. The humans lost 11. The hall went silent. You think I am lying, Vexthal said. You think I am exaggerating. You think perhaps the Corvani are simply weak warriors, and your own species would do better. He shook his head slowly. I thought the same things once. I learned the truth in blood and fire. I learned the truth. I thought the same thing. I thought the same thing. I learned the truth in blood and fire. He activated the holographic projector built into the floor. A 3-dimensional image appeared in the air above him. It showed a human female in military armor. She was not large by human standards. Her hair was the color of autumn leaves, and her face was covered in freckles. She was smiling in the picture. This is Lieutenant Katie Morgan, Vexthal said. She was 26 years old when this image was captured. She was the leader of the security team on Helion 7. He zoomed in on her eyes. They were green and bright and looked friendly. This woman killed 37 of my soldiers during the campaign. She did this over the course of 6 days with minimal sleep. On the final day, she had a broken arm and 3 cracked ribs. She was bleeding from wounds that would have killed most species, and she was still fighting. Vexthal's voice dropped lower. She was still smiling. He let that image hang in the air for a long moment before continuing. You must understand something about humans that we did not understand when we first encountered them. They are not like us. They are not like any species in this assembly. They come from a death world. This caused some murmuring in the crowd. Death worlds were rare. They were planets where the conditions were so harsh that intelligent life should never have evolved at all. Their planet is covered in radiation from their star. Their atmosphere contains a highly reactive gas called oxygen that destroys organic material from the inside. They share their world with millions of species of bacteria, viruses, parasites, and predators that are constantly trying to kill them. They have natural disasters that destroy entire cities. Storms, earthquakes, floods, volcanic eruptions. Vexthal spread his forearms wide, and yet they survived. More than survived. They thrived. They conquered their death world and then looked up at the stars and said, "We want those too." He brought up another image. This one showed the evolutionary history of humans. It showed their ancestors on the plains of their home continent, running after prey animals. They are pursuit predators, Vexthal explained. Most predators in the galaxy use speed, venom, claws, or ambush tactics. Humans use none of these. They simply follow their prey. They walk after it. They jog after it. And they do not stop. He showed footage of ancient humans hunting. They did not sprint. They did not attack immediately. They simply followed. Hour after hour. Day after day. Until the animal they were chasing collapsed from exhaustion. No creature on their planet could outrun them over long distances. Not because humans are fast. They are not. But because humans do not stop. Their bodies are designed for endurance. They can regulate their temperature through sweating, allowing them to remain active in heat that would kill other predators. They can run for days without rest if necessary. Vexthal turned off the projector and faced the assembly directly. This is what we faced on Helion 7. This is what we did not understand. We thought if we hit them hard enough, fast enough, they would break, they would surrender, they would give up. He shook his head slowly. Humans do not give up. It is not in their nature. They will fight until they win, or until every single one of them is dead. And even then, they will try to take you with them. The hall was completely silent now. No one was laughing anymore. "I am here to give you a warning," Vexthal said. "The same warning I wish someone had given me 3 years ago. Do not underestimate humans. Do not try to conquer them. Do not try to enslave them. Do not provoke them." He turned and began walking toward the exit. "Because if you do," he said over his shoulder, "you will learn what we learned. Humans are not prey. They have never been prey. They are the hunters, and once they start hunting you, they will never, ever stop." 3 years before Vexthal stood before the Galactic Assembly, a small cargo ship called the Wandering Star drifted through the Helix Nebula. It was an old ship, patched together with spare parts, and held together mostly by hope, but it was home to its crew of 5 humans who made their living hauling freight between the outer colonies. Captain Danny Cole sat in the pilot's chair, his feet up on the console, reading a book made of actual paper. It was a luxury he allowed himself. A reminder of Earth and the forests he had grown up in. He was a tall man with graying hair and kind eyes that had seen too much of the universe to be surprised by anything anymore. Or so he thought. "Danny, we have a signal," said Amy Brennan from the communications station. She was the youngest of the crew, barely 23, with short dark hair and quick hands that could fly any ship ever built. "It is coming from about 2 light minutes away. Looks like a distress call." Danny put down his book and swung his feet off the console. "What kind of ship?" "Unknown design. Never seen anything like it." Amy pulled up the signal on the main screen. "The message is automated. It just keeps repeating the same pattern. Universal distress code, though. Someone is in trouble." Sam Ortiz looked up from his engineering station. He was a heavyset man with a thick beard and arms covered in burn scars from years of working with plasma conduits. "Could be a trap. Pirates use fake distress signals all the time out here." "Could be," Danny agreed. "Could also be someone dying alone in the dark because no one came to help." Laura Vance, the ship's medic, stepped onto the bridge. She was a small woman with steady hands and a calm voice that could soothe anyone. "What are we talking about?" "Distress signal," Amy said. "Captain is deciding whether to be a hero or be smart." Danny smiled. "Being smart has never been my strong point. Jake, what do you think?" Jake Reeves emerged from the corridor behind the bridge. He was the ship's security officer. Though that title was generous for a 5-person cargo hauler, he was an average-looking man, neither tall nor short, with brown hair and brown eyes and the kind of face you would forget immediately after meeting him. But there was something in the way he moved, something quiet and controlled, that made people nervous without knowing why. "I think if someone needs help, we help them," Jake said simply. "That is what we do." Danny nodded. "That is what we do." "Amy, set a course. Sam, make sure we can run if this goes bad. Laura, prep the medical bay just in case. Jake, grab a weapon and meet me at the airlock." The wandering star changed course and headed toward the signal. The ship they found was unlike anything in human databases. It was shaped like a crescent moon, with smooth black armor and glowing blue symbols along its hull. It was much larger than the wandering star, at least 3 times the size. It floated dead in space. No lights, no engine signatures, nothing but that repeating distress signal. "No life signs," Amy reported, "but our sensors might not be able to read their biology." "Only one way to find out," Danny said. He and Jake suited up and crossed to the alien vessel through the darkness between ships. The inside of the alien ship was dark and cold. Their flashlights cut through the blackness, revealing corridors made for creatures much larger than humans. The walls were covered in strange writing and symbols that meant nothing to them. "This place gives me a bad feeling," Jake said quietly. Danny was about to agree when the lights came on. They were surrounded. At least 20 aliens filled the corridor, appearing from hidden doors and panels in the walls. They were tall, over 7 feet, with gray skin and 4 arms each. Their faces were flat, with small eyes and wide mouths full of sharp teeth. They wore armor and carried weapons that glowed with barely contained energy. One of them stepped forward. He was larger than the others and had markings on his armor that suggested rank. "Mammals," the alien said, his voice translated through a device on his chest. "Soft little mammals from the primitive world. You responded to our trap, just like all the others." Danny raised his hand slowly. "We came to help. We thought you were in distress." The alien laughed. It was an ugly sound. "We are Corvani raiders. We do not need help from anyone, especially not from creatures as weak as you. You will make acceptable slaves in the Outer Rim markets. If you cooperate, you will not be damaged too badly." Jake had not raised his hands. He stood very still, watching the aliens with those brown eyes that revealed nothing. "How many of you are there?" Jake asked calmly. The Corvani leader seemed amused by the question. 22 warriors. More than enough to handle 2 soft little mammals." Jake nodded slowly. "You should have brought more." What happened next would be told and retold in Corvani space for years to come, growing more terrifying with each telling. Jake moved faster than any of the Corvani could track. He was under the leader's guard before anyone could react, his hands finding the weak points in the alien's armor with terrible precision. There was a crack, loud in the silent corridor, and the leader fell. Danny was moving too, years of bar fights and dock brawls taking over. He was not as skilled as Jake, but he was angry, and he was human, and he did not stop. Back on the Wandering Star, Amy heard the commotion over the radio. "Sam, get the engines hot. Laura, we might need you at the airlock." "What is happening over there?" Sam asked, his fingers flying over his console. "I am not sure," Amy admitted. "But it does not sound good." She was wrong. It was going very well. For the humans, at least. Jake fought like something out of a nightmare. He used the Corvani size against them, staying close where their longer arms could not reach him. He broke bones and collapsed joints and disabled warriors twice his size with movements that seemed almost casual. Danny grabbed a fallen Corvani weapon and figured out how to use it in seconds. He fired twice, dropping 2 aliens who were trying to flank Jake. By the time Sam and Laura crossed over to help, it was already over. 14 Corvani lay on the floor, dead or unconscious. The remaining 8 had fled deeper into the ship, sealing doors behind them. Jake was breathing hard but uninjured. Danny had a cut on his forehead that Laura immediately started treating. "What are you?" one of the wounded Corvani whispered, staring at Jake with something that looked like fear. Jake knelt down beside the alien. His face was calm, almost gentle. "We are humans," he said simply. "And we just wanted to help. Remember that." Remember that we came in peace, and you attacked us. Remember what happened when you did." He stood up and walked back toward the airlock. "Tell your people," Danny added, looking at the wounded aliens. "Tell them what happened here. Tell them what humans do when someone threatens our family." The surviving Corvani did tell their people. They sent a warning across all their channels, marked with the highest priority codes. Do not engage the mammals. Do not underestimate them. Do not provoke them. But warnings are easy to ignore, especially when you believe yourself to be superior. The Corvani High Command read the report and dismissed it as the excuses of incompetent raiders. These humans were clearly just lucky. They would learn otherwise soon enough. The Corvani High Command looked at the human species and saw opportunity. Here was a young race, barely out of their own solar system, with limited military power and primitive technology. Their worlds were rich with resources. Their population was small compared to the great empires of the galaxy. They would be easy to conquer and easy to control. The humans had done nothing to provoke the Corvani. They had committed no crimes, violated no territories, threatened no one, but they had something the Corvani wanted, and that was reason enough. A fleet of 12 battle cruisers was assembled. 800 of the finest Corvani warriors were selected for the ground campaign. Commander Vexthal, a veteran of dozens of successful invasions, was chosen to lead the assault. The target was Helion 7, a small mining colony on the edge of human space. It was supposed to be simple. It was supposed to be quick. It was supposed to send a message to the rest of humanity that resistance was pointless. Instead, it became the worst military disaster in Corvani history. The human colony on Helion 7 was home to about 200 people. Most were miners and engineers who had come to extract valuable minerals from the planet's crust. The security team consisted of just 12 soldiers led by Lieutenant Katie Morgan and her second-in-command, Sergeant Ben Torres. When the Corvani fleet appeared in orbit, the humans did not panic. They did not try to flee. They did not send messages begging for mercy. Lieutenant Morgan gathered everyone in the main mining complex and gave a simple speech. "They think we are weak," she said, her voice steady and calm. "They think because we are few and they are many, we will break. They are wrong. This is our home. These are our people. And we do not give up our homes. We do not abandon our people. Not ever." She looked around at the faces watching her. Miners, engineers, cooks, doctors, people who had never held a weapon in their lives. Anyone who wants to surrender can walk out that door right now. No one will judge you. No one will blame you. She paused. But anyone who stays to fight, and we fight until we win, or until there is nothing left of us to fight with. No one left. The Corvani landed their forces expecting to face a terrified, disorganized enemy. Instead, they walked into a nightmare. The humans had spent the hours before the invasion preparing. Sam Ortiz, who had been on Helion 7 visiting his sister, rigged the mining tunnels with explosive charges. Laura Vance set up medical stations in hidden locations throughout the complex. Even the cooks and administrators were given weapons and basic training. The first Corvani assault wave hit the main entrance of the mining complex. They expected to brush aside any resistance within minutes. 3 hours later, they had advanced exactly 12 meters and lost 40 warriors. Commander Vexthal watched from orbit with growing disbelief. His soldiers were equipped with the finest weapons and armor the Corvani Empire could produce. They had years of training and combat experience, and they were being held at bay by miners with outdated rifles. "Send in the second wave," he ordered. "Full armor support." The second wave pushed deeper into the complex, but every meter cost them dearly. The humans had turned the mining tunnels into a maze of traps and ambush points. They appeared from nowhere, struck hard, and disappeared before the Corvani could respond. They used the narrow corridors to negate the Corvani's size advantage. They collapsed tunnels, flooded passages, and used the planet itself as a weapon. Lieutenant Morgan was everywhere. She seemed to never sleep, never rest, never slow down. When a group of Corvani broke through to the residential area, she led the counterattack personally. When a wounded human needed extraction, she went herself. When morale started to drop, she walked among her people with that easy smile and made them believe they could win. On the fourth day, the Corvani tried a different approach. A squad of their best infiltrators captured 3 human civilians who had been hiding in an outer storage facility. They sent a message to Lieutenant Morgan, "Surrender now, or we execute the prisoners." Morgan's response came 30 minutes later. It was not a message, it was a raid. She led her team through Corvani lines in the dead of night. They moved in complete silence, using hand signals, and knowing each other so well that words were unnecessary. They hit the Corvani position from 3 directions at once. Not a single Corvani from that squad survived. Morgan carried 2 of the rescued civilians back to base herself, 1 under each arm, despite the wound in her side that was bleeding through her armor. When Sergeant Torres tried to make her stop for medical treatment, she just smiled at him. "I will rest when they are safe," she said. Not before. The Corvani were not prepared for this kind of war. They were used to enemies who would break, who would surrender, who would accept defeat when the odds became impossible. The humans did none of these things. Worse, the humans learned. Every tactic the Corvani used worked only once. By the second attempt, the humans had developed countermeasures. They studied Corvani weapons and figured out how to use them. They analyzed Corvani armor and found its weak points. They observed Corvani behavior and predicted their movements. On the 6th day, Commander Vexthal himself led a ground assault. He wanted to see these humans for himself, to understand what made them so different from every other species he had conquered. He found Lieutenant Morgan defending a collapsed section of tunnel. Her left arm was broken, held in a makeshift sling. Her armor was scorched and cracked. She had been fighting for almost 50 hours with only brief pauses, and she was smiling. Vexthal had faced enemies who screamed with rage. He had faced enemies who wept with fear. He had faced enemies who begged for mercy. He had never faced an enemy who smiled. "Why?" he asked her, genuinely confused. Morgan looked at him with those bright green eyes, and Vexthal felt something he had never felt before in his long career of war. He felt afraid. "You do not understand," she said, her voice calm despite her injuries. "Winning is not the point. Protecting my people is the point. And I will keep doing that until you kill me. And even then, the ones who come after me will keep fighting, because that is what humans do." She raised her weapon with her one good arm. "Now, are you going to stand there talking, or are we going to fight?" They fought. And Vexthal lost. By the end of the 7th day, the Corvani had fewer than 100 soldiers left. Human reinforcements were on the way. Commander Vexthal, wounded and humiliated, ordered a full retreat. As his shuttle lifted off from Helion 7, he looked down at the battle-scarred mining complex. Somewhere down there, Lieutenant Katie Morgan was probably still smiling. He would never forget that smile for as long as he lived. The Galactic Assembly had grown very quiet. Representatives who had been whispering among themselves were now completely still. Those who had been amused by the old Corvani soldier's story were amused no longer. Even the Drenari delegate who had laughed earlier sat with his mouth closed and his eyes wide. Vexthal stood at the center of the speaking platform, his 4 arms folded across his chest. He had told them about Helion 7. He had told them about Lieutenant Katie Morgan and her impossible defense, but he was not finished. "Some of you are thinking that this was a single battle," he said, his voice echoing through the silent hall. "You are thinking that perhaps the Corvani were simply unprepared, or that this Morgan woman was unusual. You are wondering if maybe a larger force, better equipped, could succeed where we failed." He shook his head slowly. "Let me tell you what happened when we tried exactly that." He pulled up another holographic display. This one showed a Corvani research facility, hidden deep in an asteroid field. After Helion 7, the High Command refused to accept defeat. They believed that conventional warfare had failed because humans were simply too stubborn to know when they had lost. So they decided to use unconventional means. The hologram changed to show a series of biological containers, each one holding a different colored liquid. "We developed a plague specifically designed to target human biology. It attacked their respiratory system, their nervous system, their immune system, all at once. In laboratory tests, it killed with 100% efficiency within 72 hours. There was no cure. There was no treatment. It was, we believed, the perfect weapon. Vexthal's voice grew heavy with something that might have been shame. We released it on 3 human colony worlds. The initial results were exactly what the High Command had hoped for. Thousands died in the first week. The humans were overwhelmed. Their medical facilities could not keep up. They begged for help from anyone who would listen. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the assembly. And then something changed. The hologram now showed human scientists working frantically in makeshift laboratories. They looked exhausted, desperate, but determined. Within 6 of their months, they had developed a cure. 6 months. Our best scientists said it would take any other species at least 50 years to even understand the plague's structure. The humans did it in half a year. A murmur ran through the assembly. This was impossible. No species could adapt that quickly. But that is not what truly terrified us, Vexthal continued. What terrified us came 2 months later. The hologram changed again. This time, it showed a human diplomat standing in the throne room of the Corvani Emperor. He was not a large man. He wore a simple suit and had the kind of face that could belong to anyone. His name was Chris Gallagher, and he had come alone to the heart of the Corvani Empire. This man requested an audience with our emperor. He came without weapons, without guards, without warships. He simply walked into our capital and asked to talk. Vexthal brought up an audio recording. The voice that came through was calm and measured, with no trace of anger or fear. Your plague killed 43,000 of our people, the human's voice said. Mothers, fathers, children, people who had done nothing to you. People who just wanted to live their lives. There was a pause. We could have responded in kind. Our scientists did not just develop a cure. They developed a counteragent. A plague designed specifically for Corvani biology. We tested it in simulations. It works. If we released it, your entire species would be extinct within 2 years. Another pause, longer this time. We chose not to. We are not like you. We do not murder civilians. We do not commit genocide. But make no mistake, if you ever attack us again, if you ever target our people with weapons like this again, we will respond. And we will not stop until every Corvani world burns. The recording ended. The assembly sat in stunned silence. I was in that throne room. Vexthal said quietly. I watched this human stand before our emperor, before the most powerful being in our civilization. And threatened to destroy us completely. And the most terrifying thing was not the threat itself. He looked around the chamber, making eye contact with as many delegates as he could. The most terrifying thing was that he meant every word. There was no bluffing. There was no exaggeration. He was simply stating a fact, the way you might state that the sun rises in the morning. If we provoked them again, they would end us. He had no doubt about this. None at all. Vexthal turned off the holographic display. Our emperor surrendered that day. We paid reparations to the families of every human killed by our plague. We signed treaties, promising to never attack human space again. We did everything the humans asked. He spread his forearms wide, and they forgave us. This caused the most confusion of anything Vexthal had said. Forgiveness was not a concept that many galactic species understood. At least not on this scale. I did not understand it at first either, Vexthal admitted. We had killed their people. We had tried to wipe them out. By any reasonable measure, they should have destroyed us when they had the chance. But instead, they offered us peace. They offered us trade. They offered us a chance to start over. He shook his head slowly, still amazed after all this time. That is when I truly understood what humans are. They are not just warriors. Though they may be the finest warriors the galaxy has ever seen, they are not just survivors. Though their ability to survive is beyond anything I have ever witnessed, they are something more. He thought about the human friends he had made in the years since the war. He thought about their strange customs, their confusing emotions, their inexplicable kindness. Humans are pack animals. They form bonds with each other that go beyond logic, beyond survival, beyond anything we can truly comprehend. They will die for complete strangers simply because those strangers are also human. They will fight impossible battles because someone they love is in danger. They will forgive terrible wrongs because holding on to hatred costs them more than letting it go. Vexthal walked toward the edge of the platform, his voice growing softer but somehow more intense. This is why I am here today. Not to tell you that humans are dangerous. You understand that now. Not to tell you that humans cannot be defeated. Perhaps they can be. Though I would not want to be the one who tries. I am here to tell you something more important. He turned back to face the assembly one final time. Humans do not want to be your enemies. They want to be your friends. They want to trade with you, learn from you, share their strange music and stranger food with you. They want peace. His voice hardened. But if you force them to be your enemies, if you hurt their people, if you threaten their families, they will become something else. They will become hunters. And once a human starts hunting you, they will never stop. They will chase you across the galaxy. They will follow you to the end of time itself. They will make you pay for every drop of blood you spilled. He let that sink in for a long moment. So I beg you, honored members of the assembly, when you meet humans, when you deal with them, when you make decisions that affect them, remember what I have told you today. Remember Helion 7. Remember the plague and what came after. Remember that every human you meet is descended from hunters who ran their prey to death across endless plains. He began walking toward the exit. And remember that you have a choice. You can be their friend, or you can be their prey. Choose wisely. 10 years had passed since Vexthal stood before the Galactic Assembly and warned them about humanity. 10 years since the Helion 7 campaign. 10 years since everything changed. The galaxy was different now. Humans had taken their place among the stars, not as conquerors, but as traders, explorers, and peacekeepers. They built space stations where dozens of species lived and worked together. They established trade routes that brought prosperity to worlds that had known only poverty. They sent doctors to plague-stricken planets and engineers to failing colonies. They were strange, these humans. They helped people who could never repay them. They made friends with species that had nothing to offer. They seemed genuinely interested in every culture they encountered, learning languages and customs and recipes with the enthusiasm of children discovering a new playground. The Corvani Empire, humbled by their failed invasion and saved from destruction by human mercy, had become one of humanity's closest allies. It was an unlikely friendship. Born from bloodshed and built on mutual respect, Corvani warriors now served alongside human soldiers in peacekeeping missions. Corvani merchants traded openly in human ports. Corvani children grew up watching human entertainment and dreaming of visiting Earth. Vexthal had retired from military service. He now worked as a cultural liaison between humans and Corvani, helping both species understand each other better. It was strange work for a soldier, but he found it satisfying in ways that war had never been. He had human friends now. Real friends. Not just political contacts or military allies. Tonight, he attended a diplomatic reception on the space station called Unity Hub. It was a celebration of 10 years of peace between humans and Corvani, and representatives from dozens of species had come to mark the occasion. The main hall was filled with beings of every shape and size, all mingling together in a way that would have been impossible a generation ago. Vexthal stood near the refreshment tables, watching the crowd. He was old now. His gray skin faded to almost white. His movements slower than they once were. But his eyes were still sharp, and he still noticed things that others missed. He watched the human ambassador, Megan Torres, work the room. She was the daughter of Ben Torres, the sergeant who had fought at Helion 7. She had her father's steady eyes and her own warmth that seemed to draw people to her like gravity. She moved from group to group, laughing at jokes, sharing stories, remembering the names of everyone she had ever met. The Drenari ambassador, a massive creature with scaled skin and crushing grip strength, shook her hand enthusiastically. Vexthal noticed that Ambassador Torres did not wince, though he knew from experience that a Drenari handshake could crack bone. Instead, she matched his grip with her own, and it was the Drenari who let go first, flexing his fingers with a surprised expression. A young Corvani diplomat approached Vexthal. His name was Keth, and he was barely 30 cycles old, too young to remember the war. He had grown up in peace, knowing humans only as trading partners and entertainment producers. "Commander Vexthal," Keth said respectfully, "it is an honor to meet you. I have studied your testimony to the Assembly. Fascinating historical material." Vexthal smiled slightly. Historical material. That was what his warnings had become. Ancient history. Studied in schools and then forgotten. "You have questions," Vexthal observed. Keth nodded eagerly. "I do, sir. I hope you will not take offense. But watching the humans tonight, watching Ambassador Torres laugh and tell jokes and make friends with everyone she meets, I find myself wondering if perhaps your warnings were exaggerated. They seem so gentle, so harmless." Vexthal did not take offense. He had expected this question. He had asked himself the same question many times over the years. "Do you know what humans call themselves?" Vexthal asked, taking a sip of his drink. Keth shrugged. "Humans, Terrans, Earthlings. I have heard several names. Yes, but those are new names. Names from their space age." Vexthal set down his glass and turned to face the young diplomat directly. "The name they give themselves in their oldest stories, the stories they have told for thousands of years, is different. They call themselves man. What does it mean? It comes from a root word in one of their ancient languages. The surface meaning is, the one who thinks. They named themselves for their intelligence, their ability to reason and plan and solve problems." Vexthal paused. "But there is an older meaning, from before they had written language, before they had cities, before they had anything but fire and sharp stones, and the will to survive." Keth leaned forward, curious despite himself. "It means hunter," Vexthal said quietly. "They named themselves the Hunters, not because it was their profession or their role in society, because it was their identity. It was what they were, at their very core." He nodded toward Ambassador Torres, who was now making a small child from an amphibious species laugh by making silly faces. "You look at her and you see warmth, kindness, gentleness. And those things are real. Humans genuinely care about others. They form bonds with anyone and anything. They adopt pets from 100 different worlds. They learn alien languages just to say hello in someone's native tongue. They are, in many ways, the friendliest species I have ever encountered." He turned back to Keth, and his eyes were serious. "But never forget what lives underneath all that warmth. Never forget that every human you meet is the descendant of survivors, of hunters, of the ones who looked at predators with fangs and claws and venom and said, 'We can take them.' And then did exactly that. They hunted their world's apex predators to extinction. They wore their skins as clothing and mounted their heads on walls as trophies." Keth swallowed nervously. "So what do we do?" Vexthal smiled. It was an expression he had learned from his human friends, and he had grown rather fond of it. "We do exactly what we are doing now. We trade with them. We laugh at their jokes. We drink their strange beverages and watch their entertainment broadcasts. We become their friends." Across the room, Ambassador Torres caught Vexthal's eye and waved cheerfully. He waved back, and his smile became genuine. "I have been friends with humans for many years now," Vexthal continued. "I have eaten meals in their homes. I have met their families. I have celebrated their holidays and mourned their dead. They have shown me kindness that I did not deserve, after everything my people did to them." He watched Megan Torres pull a shy young alien into a conversation, putting them at ease with her easy manner and warm laughter. "They are kind because they choose to be," Vexthal said. "They are peaceful because they can afford to be. They have nothing to prove and nothing to fear. They know exactly what they are capable of, and that knowledge gives them the freedom to be gentle." He picked up his glass again and took a long drink. "The only thing more dangerous than being humanity's enemy is being foolish enough to become one when you could have been their friend." They will forgive almost anything if you give them the chance. They will work alongside former enemies and build new futures with people who once tried to destroy them. Keth watched the humans in the crowd, seeing them differently now. Seeing the hunters behind the smiles. But if you hurt them, if you threaten the people they love, if you force them to remember what they truly are. Vexthal trailed off. What happens then? Keth asked. Vexthal looked at the young diplomat for a long moment before answering. Then you will understand why we call them the apex predators of their world. Then you will understand why my warnings were not exaggerated. Then you will understand exactly what I saw in Lieutenant Morgan's eyes as she smiled at me across a battlefield. He set down his empty glass and straightened his ceremonial robes. But you will only understand it once, he said quietly, because you will not survive to understand it twice. He walked away to join his human friends, leaving the young Corvani standing alone with the weight of his words. Across the hall, Ambassador Megan Torres was teaching a group of alien children an ancient human game called Rock, Paper, Scissors. She laughed when one of them won, clapping her hands with delight. Her eyes crinkled with genuine joy. She looked perfectly harmless. Vexthal knew better. And now, so did Keth.